Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here again. As you know, whenever I'm here, you can expect something kind of different and or out of the box, and today will be no exception. So for those of you that are on Zoom, I just want to let you know for the first few minutes here, I'm going to kind of be out here instead of up there. And I want you to know at least portions of this sermon are participatory, which means you don't get to just sit there and listen, but you have to actually respond and do some thinking on your own. And that's how we're going to. Today's sermon is about perception. And we'll get into that a little bit more later, but we're going to start with you looking at me. All right, so I want everyone here to be looking at me. And if I'm having to face you, I want you to be looking at my face. You have a job right now, and I'm going to come walk around so that you all get a really good look at my face. I want you to look at my face. I want you to specifically look in my eyes. And as you're doing this, I want you to do or be aware of what you naturally do, which is you're going to figure me out. Yeah, I want you to be thinking, who is this person? I want you to figure out what you think you know about me, just from looking at me. Okay, so I'm going to walk around and go ahead, get in my face. Like just look right in there. Look into my eyes. What do you see? What do you notice about my face specifically? Who do you think I am? What do you think I'm like? The kind of person I am, the things that I think, no. Can't just you got to look at me. You can't just look away. Like how often in life do you get to do this, right? Like stare someone in the face and just look at them. I want you to know me visually. Look at my face and think about what you know about me, who you think I am, what you think I am like. Even in the back, you guys aren't free from it. You have to look at me as well. Just because you have a task doesn't mean you don't get to do this, right? Right here in the eyes. Who do you think I am? And for some of you, you know me a little bit, so you have an idea of who you think I am. Some of you have maybe never seen me before, and this is the first time, right? Who do you think I am? What am I like as a person? Figure it out just from this right here. I'm coming back over here too, so don't worry. I'm not leaving you out. And choir, you're not off the hook either. Nice to meet you. Good to see you this morning. All right, choir, here we go. How you doing? Good to see you this morning, Julie. What do you see there? And even for those of you that maybe I've known for a while, we've maybe never sat and actually looked at each other face to face. So here's the interactive part. Now that you've looked at me, I want you to tell me the things you think you know about me now. Just from looking at me, what would you say I'm like? Who do you think I am? And this is, you can't be shy. This is, you have to participate. Otherwise, we're going to stand here looking at each other, and it's going to be really awkward. All right, so you need to answer the question, who do you think I am? All right, who has an answer? Yeah. Confident. All right, well, what do you see about me that makes you say that? Okay, so just to do that itself, okay, what else do you know about me? Yeah. Very strong. That's pretty deep stuff, right? But also very fragile, and at times, my heart is breaking. Yeah. Okay, there was another hand that's up. Yeah.
You have a sense of humor.
A sense of humor. What makes you say that? What's so funny about me?
You have a sparkle in your eyes. You're just doing this, interacting with everybody.
Yeah, this is a kind of humorous thing, right? Yeah.
Interest in others and engaging.
Interest in others and engaging. All right? Yeah. Approachable. That's good. I look ready. All right? Passionate. Up here? Yes, Paul.
You're a risk taker.
A risk taker. This is pretty amazing. So what we're doing right now is what Dr. Nicholas Epley from University of Chicago would call mind reading. This is like a biological trait that we all have. It's a human trait that we are able to look at people and read their mind. And by reading their mind, I'm not talking about like being a psychic and know what they're thinking. I'm talking about we look at people and we're able to figure them out. And we're pretty accurate with that. And just to give you an idea, can I have you do something for me? I was reading your mind. Well, I've done this before. I've read people's minds before. We know what we think of each other, and we know what others think of us. So before the service started, I wrote down what you would say about me.
Kind, outgoing, laid back, bold, confident, risk taker, thinker, out of the box, passionate.
Right? So I knew you, and I knew how you would respond to me. So that's an amazing trait that we have. This is a biological thing that we've developed over like, I don't know how many centuries or whatever, but it's essential to our aspect of being human. We were made for each other. The way we have survived as a species is by connecting and building upon each other. When you think about it, we're like the weakest species, right? Like out in nature, if we were just out in nature, we wouldn't make it. The way we have risen to where we are is by collaboration, by working with each other, by building on top of each other. Our ability to communicate and work with each other is what allows us to be what we are. We are made for that. This ability to mind read is key to that. When you meet someone, you need to know immediately, are they safe or are they a threat? Are they honest or are they a liar? Are they friendly? Survival. And not only can we read people's minds that way, but we also can know what people are feeling, right? You do this in everyday life. You ever had someone walk up to you and you can tell like they're in a bad mood or a sad mood or they're really happy? Like how do we know that? Before we even speak a word, we know that. It's that mind reading thing. That's an innate ability that we have. But there's a problem with this ability. Let me come back up here. I can let you guys be safe again, not worrying about when I'm going to dart out at you again. When Epley did this study, he grabbed pairs of people that were together, mostly husbands and wives, or people that were together that knew each other really well. And he asked them to fill out a survey on how their spouse or the other would answer certain questions. And before he had them do this, he had them predict how well they would get all the questions right. It's kind of like the whole newlywed game, for those of you who remember that. He had them predict how well they would do, and then he had them fill it out, so there's the results of how they actually did. And so there's the line of what we call chance. If you just randomly filled out these things, you would get like 10% of the questions right. And when they filled out the forms and tallied them, people were actually correct 45% of the time. That's a huge increase over chance, right? So they knew each other pretty well. But here's where the problem comes in. They predicted that they would be right 80% of the time. Yeah. So what's the lesson in this? We think we understand this much, but we really understand this much. But this much is more than chance. It's still a skill. It's still an ability. You just did it, right? And I just did it. And we showed you how accurate that was. It's amazing how well we know each other without knowing each other. But we don't know each other as well as we think we do. So let me tell you a little bit about how the brain works. I know you came to like neurology class today. Everything that you experience in life, well, let me back up even before that. Your brain is a giant sorting machine. It's a filing machine. And it takes every experience that you go through and it sorts it and creates a file for it. Everything that you know, there's like a little file in your brain that says, here's what baseball is, here's what church is, here's what, blah, blah, blah. Whatever experience that you have, there's a file for that. And then when you have a new experience, or as you're walking through the world, your brain is constantly opening up those files to draw information. So when I first walked up here, you opened up several different files. You opened up a file for a large 6'4" man. You opened up a file for a biracial looking person. You opened up a file for braids. You opened up a file for suits. You opened up a file for pastor, for sermon. All of these things because you're associating those with me as I came up. And those things were causing you to create a perception of who you think I am and what this experience was going to be like. And of course, I've just changed. Whatever you thought before is not what's happening now, right? But that's how our brain works. You have all of these files. I want you to be aware that you have these files, because what happens is there's this concept that's called naive realism. And what naive realism is the belief that what we perceive is actually the truth instead of just a perception of the truth. We do this all the time as well. Naive realism says that what we perceive is actually the truth. When you look, I wish I would have worn what some people call my pink sports coat today. I should have thought of that. I have a sports coat that from where you're standing would look pink. And you would be sitting there going, Nate's wearing a pink sports coat. But if you came up to it really close, you'd see it's tiny little threads of red and white. It's not pink, it's red and white. That's not the same as pink. But from where you're standing, like I don't know what this jacket looks like from over there, but it's like brown and white. From out there, I don't know what it looks like, but not as good as my red jacket. But anyways, that's naive realism. That what we perceive, we believe is the truth instead of just a perception of the truth. And that's something that gets us into a lot of trouble. Okay, so moving away from neurology class right now and moving into the Bible, I have a really long passage that I need to read to you. And I know how people like being read to, so that's why I put it in the sermon. It's a long one. It's like a whole page. Yeah. So if you didn't get your dose of daily scripture today, here we go. I'm going to read from Matthew 25, 31 to 46. And you may have read this before. It's called The Sheep and the Goats. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all of the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous, those people who are on his right, will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters, whatever you did for one of the least brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then the king will say to those on his left, now we're talking about the goats, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They will also answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick or in prison, and did not help you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Now, we've probably heard parts of that before, and we tend to think of that about, as we do for others, we do to Christ, or we do for Christ, being the hands and feet. And that's typically where that message goes, but there's something else that happens in that passage that you've probably not thought about. That's why I'm here, because I think about all the weird things. I want you to think about the response. The sheep, the righteous ones, what was their response? "Lord, when did we see you hungry, thirsty, blah, blah, blah." Now I want you to think about the goats, the cursed ones, the unrighteous. What was their response? Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty? Do you understand what this is saying about us? Whether we see ourselves as righteous or unrighteous, whether our perspective of ourselves or others is they are righteous or unrighteous, the response was the same. Neither group saw Christ. Neither of them. The righteous did not see Christ. The unrighteous did not see Christ. This parable is about vision. It's about our vision problem, our inability to see. And he's saying it's the same for the righteous and the unrighteous. So that alone right there should kind of like knock you down a little bit, right? Like, okay, what are you trying to say? I'm saying exactly what you think I'm saying. We have a vision problem. Regardless of what we think we are, or who we think we are, or how we think we perceive, according to Scripture, we all have a vision problem. We don't see Christ, at least not as we should, or in the places that we should. We tend to see things through the world's eyes. And this is where those files come in, because your perception is an accumulation of all those different files. We call them neural pathways. And when you see someone, you immediately open all the files that you deem associated with that person, and then you build a perspective on them. And sometimes you're right, but you're never fully right. You are partially right. That's naive realism. That's how we miss Christ when we see others. So easy to then label. Well, why does this matter? I have another really long parable to share with you. Here's the beauty. You just heard it. You just heard it in the children's message. It's called the parable of the bags of gold. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to paraphrase it for you. Is that okay? Okay. So here's the story. There is this master, and he's going to go away on a trip. And so he goes to 3 of his servants. He says, I'm going to be going. I'm going to give you 5 bags of gold. I'm going to give you 2 bags of gold. And I'm going to give you 1 bag of gold. I'm entrusting this to you. And he goes away. And then he comes back after a while. After a period of time, what happens is the servant who was given 5 bags of gold, he goes and he invests it and he doubles that money for his master. The servant that was given 2 bags of gold, same thing. He invests it. He uses that money wisely. He turns 2 into 4. But the 3rd servant, he buries it. He takes the 1 coin that he was given and he buries it so that he does not lose it. Now the master comes back and he gathers his servants. He says, I'm back, like, show me what you did. And so the first servant says, since you entrusted me with 5, I invested it, and now I have 10, and I'm giving you back 10. And the master says, oh, fantastic, good and faithful servant. Since you were trusted with a little, I'll give you more. I'm going to double how much I give you. And then the second servant comes and says, I took my 2, and I'm giving you back 4. And same thing, master says, wow, good and faithful servant. Since I could trust you with a little bit, now I'm going to give you a lot. And then the 3rd servant comes up, and he says, Master, I know that you are a hard man, a shrewd man, that you go and you reap from fields that you did not sow. So because of that, I did not want to lose your money. I feared that. So I buried that 1 coin, and I'm giving it back to you. Here's that 1 coin. And the master's hacked off. He calls him a wicked, lazy servant. How dare you, you wicked, lazy servant. And then he says this, you knew that I was a hard man. You knew that I was shrewd, reaping where I did not sow. That's what you thought of me. And so because of that, you decided to hide it. So perhaps he's mad, perhaps he's offended. I don't know. But he cast that servant out. You wicked, lazy servant. And then it goes on to say a few more things that don't need to open up because that's a whole other sermon. But I want you to think about what this is saying. What separated the 3rd servant from the first 2? It was perception. The first 2 believed that their master entrusted them with this gold. Since you entrusted me with 5, I went out and now I'm giving you 10 back. I invested that. But the 3rd one, His perception of the master was his master was mean, his master was hard, his master was crooked. Whatever you want to insert there, he had a different view of his master. Because of that view, because of his perception of his master, he was filled with fear. And because he was filled with fear, the action he took was to bury that gold. So that's a great story, but I want to point out a pattern in that. The pattern is this, and this is what we need to apply to our life. The pattern is this. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your perception leads to action. The things that you think, all of those files that are going here as they come together, things that you perceive, they lead to action. Once action happens, action can never be taken back. Action is a thing that comes out here into the world, and for every action there is what? A reaction. Your perception creates action, creates a reaction. He thought his master was hard. Perception. He buried that coin. Action. He was cast out. Reaction. That is how the world works. Perception, action, reaction. It works that way for all of us. Why does that matter? Well, it should put perception in a different light now. The way you perceive something, the way you look at something is going to determine how you act in this world. And the way that you act in this world is going to determine how the world responds to you. That's a pattern that we see in Scripture. So I mentioned this is about using perception as a spiritual discipline. So what is a spiritual discipline? It's just a habit, a practice, or an experience that's designed to help you build, to grow, to strengthen your spiritual life and your character. These are things like praying, fasting, coming to a worship service, meditating. All of these things are spiritual practices that help us stay aligned, to help keep us focused, to help us grow spiritually. I want you to think of a spiritual discipline as like a tool. And what do we use tools for? We use tools to build something, to repair something, or to deconstruct something. And it's your faith that we're talking about here. That's what a spiritual discipline or a spiritual tool does. Helps you to build, repair, or deconstruct your spiritual life. I want to give you a visual aid. This is what perception is like. This is the tool that perception is like. So what is this? A measuring tape, right? Next time or every time that you see a measuring tape, I want you to think, oh yeah, that's a spiritual tool, which is perception. Perception, the way you look at something, is also a spiritual tool. If you'll be awake and use it and not be asleep and just let your mind do what it'll do. One more thing about the mind before I get back to this. Your mind, all of our minds, are lazy. We are lazy. Once a neural pathway has been constructed in your mind, you're going to go back to that every single time. Think about when you drive to work. How many times do you drive the exact same route? Yeah, right? I mean, just think about your life. How many times every day do you do the exact same thing? And some of you are like really notorious for that. Some of you probably eat like the same breakfast every day and you have like the same time you do X, Y, Z. Our brain is lazy. Once our brain loves to learn. It's doing that all the time. But once it believes it's learned something, forget it. That's etched in stone, done. Ever try breaking a bad habit? Yeah. Once our brain has learned, it's like, I'm done with this. Our brain hates to relearn. But this is where perception as a spiritual tool is vital. Because a lot of times we need to relearn. A lot of times the thing that comes in our mind as a result of all these files coming together is not wholly accurate. Our perceptions are not wholly accurate. Wholly accurate, that's pretty funny, right? There's like a pun in there. I just got that. Some of you are just getting it now too. All right, we're not all, okay. Not everyone gets an A. This right here. This is perception, a measuring tool. Now, I am not a carpenter. I'm not like really good with that kind of stuff. But I have worked on a lot of volunteer teams where we had to do things like that. Anyone here do that kind of work, like any kind of building, constructing, anything? Like 2 people? Fantastic. So one of the things that I learned in building with these other people was this phrase, measure twice and cut once. Yeah, everyone's like, heard that? I thought it was just me. I thought I was like, brilliant. No, okay. Measure twice and cut once. So let me ask you this. What does that mean, to measure twice and cut once? I know, now I'm coming back down, saying, uh-oh, feel the stress rising up again. What does that mean, to measure twice and cut once? Don't rush to judgment? Double check your work. That's pretty simple, right? Like we know, measure twice, cut once. Here's the real question. Why would you do that? Why would you measure twice and cut once? What's the importance of that? Why measure twice and cut once? All right? Say that. To get it right the first time. Yep. What else? Once you cut, you cannot uncut. To not make a mistake. Why is it important for those things to happen? Measuring is free, but the thing that you're cutting, there's like a value to that, right? Like it's not. So you may have like limited resources. I only have one piece of wood, so I better cut it right the first time because you can't do it twice. I want you to understand the importance of these things that you're saying, and I want you to now apply this to people. And I want you to think of that piece of wood as a person. And before you decide to cut, which is an action, right? It's an action, and what happens to an action? There's a reaction. Before you make that cut, you better measure twice. Think about your perception. Look at that person a second time. Think a little bit deeper. Access some more files. Let time happen. Figure that out. Because once you say that thing, once you do that thing, it's out there. And there's going to be a reaction. And a lot of those reactions are not good. Value. Okay, a piece of 2x4 has a value. It's like $13, right, if you go to Home Depot. Now let's put a person on that chopping block, right? What's the value there? Thank you. It is immeasurable. You cannot measure that. So if we will measure twice and cut once on a piece of wood, how much more should we measure twice before we cut on a person or a situation, whatever it is? So I know those parables are about other things as well. But when you measure twice, sometimes you get something different, right? There's a different message. There is a pattern that God is showing us. What you think, what you believe, will be what you do. And that will be how you affect the world. The last thing I'll say in closing is this. We treat each other as people the way that we treat each other because of how we see each other, or because of how we don't see each other. Think about the world that we live in. It happens in your family, it happens in your personal circle, and it happens in the greater world. We treat each other the way we do because of how we see each other. We don't take the time to sit there and look into each other's face and actually care enough to see who's actually there. That's not the way that we live. I'm thinking back to the response, the very first thing we said in this service. That's what we're talking about. I don't have that with me, but I know we said it, about how we would look at each other, how would we treat each other, what table we would feed off of, not the one that the world gives us, which lumps us into different sides and different groups and says, go ahead and let your lazy brain take over, right? That's how we live. Don't do that. Perception is a spiritual tool. Jesus made it plain and simple. He said, love God with all your heart, mind, strength, and love others as yourself. You cannot love others until you see them. Amen.